And good afternoon. I'm Bruce Pearson with Jersey Talk Radio, and today we have a special guest with us, Mr. Robert Burns from Washington, New Jersey. He's got a talent that is very hard to comprehend. It's even harder to accept unless you've seen it in person, and a lot of people have over the years. So we're going to have Robert share his background, his experiences, his capabilities with us, and as part of that, we're going to come to find out about a capability and a resource that you may want to avail yourself or your organization of. So, without further ado, Robert, I'd like to welcome you to Jersey Talk Radio here in Flemington, and just want to remind everybody we're at the Flemington Car and Truck Country Broadcast Center on Main Street in Flemington, and we appreciate all of our sponsors. We'll be talking about them in a little bit later. But, Robert, welcome to the show, and thanks for coming down from Washington to be with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm glad we didn't get a blizzard today.
Not
would
this
have made
time.
it rather difficult. You know, I don't have a helicopter. Anyway, a little bit of history about me is I was born and raised in Mendham Township, New Jersey. Went to school there, went to Morristown High School, graduated, got married. Got divorced, got married, got divorced twice. But the thing is, you know, everybody.
That'll teach you.
Yeah, I know. One of the quotes on my website that I have on quotes is, once you discover your purpose in life, you will realize you've always known it. And it took me a while to discover it, but I started in my 40s to begin to realize what my true purpose was. And I graduated high school, and I started studying hypnotherapy, and then I got into the neurolinguistics, and I find that to be one of the most fascinating things that you can possibly help. It's also referred to as brief therapy. I've had people come to me with allergies, phobias, and they spend 45 minutes to an hour, and those allergies and phobias are gone.
That's amazing. When you think about the amount of money and aggravation that people say that I've had allergies for years, and they're taking over-the-counter or prescription medications, and they're
with all the side effects.
Absolutely.
And they don't have side effects with me. They don't. It's amazing. I've had people come to me with migraines, and 1 or 2 sessions, no more migraines. I had a woman come to me who had migraine, asthma. She'd had asthma for her whole life. She was 47. And I did a session with her, and she hasn't had an asthma attack since.
You know, I have a person I used to work with here in the area who had such debilitating migraines that she missed days and days and days of work. I mean, I have 2 younger sisters, and my oldest younger sister, who lives in New Mexico, she gets migraines that are just as debilitating as what you're talking about. And I would like to refer you to either of these folks, obviously. It brings up a good point. Can you do this remotely or by Skype, or do you have to physically be with them?
I can do it on the phone. It's much more effective in person. I don't have Skype, but I should get it, because a lot of people say, do you have Skype?
Well, if you have a laptop with a camera in it, we can hook you up. I can help you get that. But okay. It may be better to be able to see the person as well as talk to them. I don't know.
Well, if I can see the person, Bruce, if I can work with them in person, then you can see certain things that you can't see on Skype or anything else, like the breathing patterns, you know, and so on and so forth. And the emotion.
But we should talk about that, but it's an interesting thing. So you don't have to be physically in contact with them necessarily. That's pretty neat.
But I can guarantee my work if I am. But I won't guarantee it if I'm not.
Wow, you can guarantee it.
Yeah.
Well, you don't get that from the medical profession, do you?
No, the medical profession they call it a practice.
Yeah, really.
Okay.
I don't want somebody who's practicing. I want somebody who's done practicing.
Well, I mean, I've had 3 people go into remission from cancer that I've worked with.
My God, that's amazing.
Well, it's all inside of us. Everything that is worthwhile is inside of us, that little spirit inside.
Well, and that's, you know, and I have interviewed thousands of people literally in the last 40 years, but if you go to the teaching of the the Hindu religion, the Buddhist religion, right. All of that believe that inner spirit, even the Christian religion, you know, that still silent voice inside you. And I have interviewed medical people that say, look, you know, the healing power does come within. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but in my observation, and I was trained in emergency medicine, spent many years in it, professionally and also as a volunteer here in this state. But, you know, how many times have we heard the story that a couple that's been together for 50 years. When the wife dies 2 weeks later, the husband dies. No overt heart attack, accident, cancer, or anything else. He just gives up the ghost, and it's over.
Well, they say it's an average of 4 years.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
But the point is, when you give up the willingness,
then
the incentive, then you go. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says. When it's time for the check, you check out.
If you have reasons to be here, you stay.
Right.
If you have no reasons, why stay?
Why stay?
Exactly. It's common sense. And the majority of people do not have common sense.
Now, one of the things that I think is really pretty remarkable and a positive sign in terms of the total medical community, and I know it's only a small tip of the iceberg, is the fact that you are a credentialed professional. You are not someone who just decided you were going to do this on the side necessarily. Tell us about your credentials and what they mean, because you have a lot of letters after your name there. So.
Yeah, I know. Well, I tell people, if you want letters after your name, put VNP. They say, what does VNP stand for? I said, very nice person. Right. But
be British, and then it's CCD, CSR, CRFC, and nobody knows what
I've got
that means.
13 certifications in hypnotherapy. Okay, I'm a master.
Wow.
Yeah, and 2 of them are for teaching, which I do teach and certify people in hypnotherapy. I've got 3 certifications in neurolinguistic programming. I've got 3 in Reiki, which is energy healing. All right.
Which is a very unpopular type of discipline now. It's very much been in the news for the last 10 or 15 years.
Well, it doesn't scare people. You know what scares people? And I've posted this.
Yeah, me.
Well, people are afraid of hypnosis because they see these jerks, and I refer to them lovingly as jerks, doing things with people. And I was talking to a bunch of teachers about 15, 20 years ago, and they were asking, well, how does a stage hypnotist pick his subjects? And what I did was I took my elbow and I put my hand on my
right.
And I was walking back and forth, and the ones that put their elbow on the desk and put their chin in their hands, those are the ones I would have called. It's called rapport.
Okay.
If people are comfortable with you, they will do more what you want because they do not want to upset you.
Well, interestingly, as a sidebar, that's exactly why what is essentially a radio show on television is better communication, because people want to put a face, they want the eye contact,
exactly.
Even if it's virtual.
Right.
The fact that they can put a face to a voice is a greater communication link than it would be if it was just listening on the radio. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it enhances the communication process. So the rapport that you develop, as you just said,
right.
is stronger when you're in the presence of one of your clients rather than doing it remotely over an electronic device.
Exactly.
That's an interesting point.
Well, the other point is I do a seminar. Okay, and you said the name of my company is Robert Burns and Associates because I have people working with me depending on which coast I'm on. But I mean, they're called the power of rapport, and I teach this. And when I learned this particular thing, my closing ratio in my construction company, which I had before I was doing this, jumped from 70 to 90%.
My God, that's.
I mean,
you can't argue the facts, folks.
No, you can't. You can't argue the facts. And I love what I do. I love what I do. And I tell people, I've traveled in limos and I've lived in my car. But I will never stop doing what I'm doing because it helps a lot of people. And I like what Dr. Wayne Dyer, who was my mentor, said.
He just passed away recently.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
And I felt that. I was miserable for about a week or 2. And I still get emotional when I talk about him. But the thing that he said, in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, and somewheres in your 50s, he said, it's what's in it for me. He said, but when you get into your 50s and you start moving on, which I have, he said, then it's how may I serve?
That's a great point.
That's a wonderful point.
And I strongly believe that. It's not what you take away, it's what you leave and give.
Exactly. I want to leave a legacy for my grandchildren, for my kids, and that's why I have all these CDs that are subliminal that talk to the inside.
And we're going to talk about that going on. But let me just show the viewers, certainly, your website, because this is you've got a very extensive website. For the folks listening on the radio, could you just read off your website?
Yeah, Bob Burns Speaks, and I'm going to spell it because if you leave out a BS, you won't get it. BOBBURNSSPEAKS.com. And on there, if you hold the cursor over About, you'll get a drop-down menu, and on that drop-down menu, you'll see quotes. Click on quotes, and you'll have 25 to 30 original quotes that I've coined. Also, click on testimonials, and you'll see them from all over the country.
Okay, I've shown the quotes, and now we're bringing up the testimonials. Oh, well, I have a son who's a graduate of Kutztown University, and Mary Kay, and that's great. That's clearly extensive accolades.
Oh yeah.
So, so go to Bob's website, folks, and take a look at it, and do a little research on your own, and you'll find out real quick he's the real deal. Let me ask you a question, and I'm sure people would want me to ask. What are the rates that you charge for an individual session? And some of the services you provide, I guess, is probably a better way to start that question.
Okay. The services I provide are just about anything you can think of that involves the mind. All right? Smoking, weight, so on. The services that I charge $150 for the first session.
Okay.
Okay, because I'm going to spend the most time. People say, is a session an hour? And I say,
right.
No, a session is a session. Sometimes it's an hour and a half. Sometimes it's 50 minutes.
Whatever it takes.
The more information I can get from you, the more I can help you. And then subsequent sessions are usually 100 to 125. I don't believe in taking anybody to the cleaner, but I live in New Jersey, too. So
it's not a hobby, folks, unfortunately.
So, and I find, too, that if people don't pay, it has no value.
Well, there's that perceived value.
Right.
Oh, I'm getting it for free, so it's not worth anything.
Exactly.
That's the psychology behind a lot of things.
Well, the thing is, too, when I work with a smoker has to pay me for 3 sessions up front, because then I know they're going to show up. All right, number one. Number two, if they do that on their second session, I give them a free subliminal smoking cessation CD that I've created. And that helps a lot. I've got I'd say probably a 95 to 98% success rate with smokers. With weight, it's about 100%.
No kidding.
No.
I have a million questions I want to ask you, but let's go back to how you came into this discipline, because I think it's important to understand, the path you took to get there. Obviously, it's not a normal career position if you had a construction company. So.
Well, my parents told me that I should go to school to become a psychologist, but I never felt the need to go to college, okay, because I didn't want to waste their money, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But
get that term out. Don't get that concept out today. Yeah? Going to college to waste your money. Yeah.
No, I didn't want to waste their money.
Right.
I mean, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But anyway, what happened as I was going along, I found that I got very interested in self-improvement, and I started listening to a lot of audio programs, Dyer, Brian Tracy, and a lot of them. And the more my mind started to develop from listening to these and my sales skills improved, I got into a friend of mine called me up and said, Bob, would you like to take a course in hypnosis? And I said, yeah. So she gave me the information. I called. They told me. I sent them a check, and I went and took it. But it was combined with NLP. So then I took my second class with this person.
And how many years ago was that, would you say?
90, 80, 88, 89, 90.
So you're 16, over a decade and a half into this for sure. So this isn't like last Tuesday you started doing this by any means.
No.
Okay.
I've been doing this longer than most. And my teacher in NLP, Brian, learned directly from Richard Bandler, who was a co-founder. And then I got my master practitioner at NLP Comprehensive out in Denver, Colorado. Okay. And that's where I went for my master practitioner, and that was unbelievable. My hypnosis, I took courses all over the country. And then I decided I want to teach it. So I took courses in teaching it. And so now I teach and I certify under a company called AMS, Advanced Motivational Strategies, which I started back in the 90s. And people, I've got students all over the country.
Now, how many folks teach this even to the extent that you do? I mean, how many people are involved in this profession nationwide, would you estimate? Just so we get an idea.
That teach it?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think anybody teaches at the same rate I do. Most of them charge thousands. I would say there's probably about 20, 30 instructors around the country that
Wow.
do it. That
So
do
it's
it.
very. I mean, I was not aware of this kind. A guaranteed success rate.
Mm-hmm.
The remission of cancer. That's you ought to be on CNN and Larry King and all the rest of it.
Well, I'd like to be. I really would, because people have to know that, I had a woman come to me, and she had cancer of the abdominal area. And number one, when you're working with somebody with hypnosis and NLP, you do not use the word cancer. I use the word mass.
Okay.
And I do not believe in cancer support groups, because what happens is you keep cancer in front of you, and what you
Right.
think about, you bring about. And I
That's
also have
interesting.
created with a dear friend of mine, Kirsten Nussgruber, who was a cancer survivor. We created a subliminal CD called Healing from Cancer. And my mentor, Dr. Eldon Taylor, from Medical Lake, Washington, has created the same thing. Well, he created it before I did. He was my teacher. But he's got a 43% remission rate with the CD. And
With the
it's-
CD.
With the CD. And it's when you get into that inner part of the mind, that's where change takes place.
Now, a couple quick questions. First of all,
Right.
as a journalist, what does mainstream medicine? How do they react to your success stories, and have they tried to discredit you?
No,
Or
not that I know of. Not that I
really?
know. Yeah.
And so you've vetted that there's been a remission, that the
Mm-hmm.
wow.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit, if you can, without obviously disclosing any HIPAA information, but tell us about the folks that you've worked with in cancer remission and their progress and how the whole thing took
Well,
place.
the thing is, I had a guy call me up, and I'll say as much as this. He was in Pennsylvania,
Okay.
and he had stomach cancer. So he said, "Can you help me?" And he was my first one. And I said, "Well, let me come over." I said, "I believe I can help you." I said, "I have a lot of confidence in what I do." So what I did was I induced a hypnotic trance. I was with him for 2 hours the first time. I induced a hypnotic trance, and what I had him do was envision. Now, this might sound kind of ridiculous to some people, but when you think in the terms of metaphor, it's very powerful. I had him see a large anaconda crawling into the Amazon River being eaten by piranhas. In other words, white
Right.
cells eating the cancer. And I did that a couple of times with him. And then I brought him up, and then I took him down again, and I had him walk, and he was Italian. I had him walk through a tomato garden, seeing all the big, luscious tomatoes. When he got to the other end of the garden, I had him turn around and walk back, and they had all shriveled up and fallen off the vine. And this talks about how the cancer shrivels up. And I did that 3 different sessions with him. And after the third session, I was sitting in a restaurant and my cell phone rang. And he said, "Bob, this is so-and-so." He said, "I just went to the doctor's." He said, "The tumor has shrunk down to 25% of the size it was." I said,
Jeez.
"Great." I said, "Do you want to do another set?" He said, "I'd like to do 2 more." He said, "Then my body will take care of it from there." And that's the way it went.
Now,
5 sessions total.
so what did his oncologist say about this? It was just spontaneous remission. That's the way they
Most
normally
likely,
term it, right?
most likely. They don't, doctors don't believe in the power of words. At least most don't. Some do.
Okay, let me follow up on that. So then, when you do a session, the key is to get beyond the conscious blocks that we have
Yes.
in conscious state. So you have to get into the subconscious and plant those paradigms in the subconscious, so that it will then carry out the autonomous
Exactly.
functions that it needs to. Is that a fair
Exactly.
assessment of what goes on?
That's a very fair assessment of what goes on. And,
Wow.
another thing that I do too, now let me just switch over to weight management. I had a woman come to me one time. She was a size 18. She wanted to be a size 6.
Which means nothing to me. I never could figure out that.
She was a big woman,
Okay.
and she wanted to become a small
All right.
woman. Okay, let's put it down. So what
carrying a
I
little
did with
extra.
her was I asked her, I said, "Well, what put the weight on? What food did you eat that put the weight on?" And she said, "Well, I love to sit in front of the TV with Italian bread and butter."
Oh,
And I said, "That really sounds delicious." I said, "I could see that." In other words, I entered her world.
right.
I said, "What 2 foods would you rather die than eat?" And she said, "Livers and kidney." So I said, "Okay." So I explained hypnosis to her. I took her.
Can't
into
disagree
hypnosis.
with that.
No, I can't
in either
either. I was
case.
a lineman.
Really.
But anyhow, I took her into a very deep altered state. And then I had her go into the television, turn it on, sit down, take out a slice of liver and spread kidney on it.
Oh, man. That'd be enough to make me swear off anything. There's not enough mustard in the world to hide this flavor of liver. So.
I got her from size 18 over about 3 or 4 sessions to a size 13, 14. Then she stopped coming. But the part that was interesting about that is her sister, who will remain nameless, okay, is a PhD psychologist who was having issues over something that happened when she was a child. And she saw the difference in her sister, and she came to me. She came to me 4 times, and we got rid of that. And that was a sexual abuse thing.
That's remarkable.
But when you can get to that right part of the mind, you can help a person accomplish miracles. And people say to me, "Thank you so much." I said, "I didn't do it." I said, "I'm the messenger. You did it."
Would you be opposed, because I'm a documentary producer, would you be opposed to, if you had permission from any of your clients, to letting us document this and follow through?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be willing to do it?
I would not be opposed to it.
If they would be willing to do it.
Oh, I know several that would.
Wow. We need to talk about that. I mean, that is a game changer. Wow. I mean, what about, have you worked with people with alcohol and and drug addiction? Because that's, you know, how many people have ruined their lives and either died or ended up spending their life in jail because of, you know, drug-related issues? And how many young people are dragged into that cesspool, never to get out of it? It ruins countless lives.
I had a very dear friend of mine, okay, who once again will remain nameless, obviously. But he came to me and he said, "Bob," he said, "I don't want to go to AA." He said, "I'm really having an issue with beer and drinking." So I worked with him 3 times, and I think he's coming up on 3 years now without a drink.
That's remarkable of my understanding, even with AA. I mean, it's tough for people to because is it not a fair assessment to say it's one thing if your conscious mind is fighting to accomplish this goal? It's another thing if it's totally internal. Your conscious mind really can't override what your internal mind is telling it has to do.
No,
so you need to convince the subconscious.
Convince the subconscious. And like Albert Einstein said, nothing great was ever accomplished with thought.
Interesting.
Because thought is conscious. Oh.
We're coming up on the half hour here.
You know, I just want to tell you one thing I noticed about you. You are a visual learner.
Well, actually, I would argue that I'm not a learner at all.
Well, no, you're a visual learner, and the reason
why do you explain that? Because I'm not following
every time you pause to think about what you're going to say, your eyes go up, so you're seeing what you're going to say.
Really?
Yeah.
That's because I have the Cliff Notes written on the inside of my glasses.
Oh my God!
I'm a visual cheater, baby.
No, you
well,
are.
Thank you. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's whatever you want to make it. I'm a visual learner. 55% of the population are visual learners. The other 45% are either auditory or kinesthetic. And when you align with somebody, that's what I teach in the workshop on rapport. When you align with somebody, okay, and you become what they are, then all of a sudden you can sell them what they want. Okay, it's not manipulation, not at all. It's influence.
Interesting.
Because
I'll quote W.C. Fields. Call me a Tartikoff. Is that bad?
There is no bad. There is no good. There's only judgment.
And once again, you know, this, the older I get and the more research I do.
You mean the more mature you get?
No, older. I don't know. No, I'm still very immature.
I'm still a kid, too.
Exactly. In my own mind, I'm a legend in my own mind, unfortunately. But the older I get, the more I see, you know, I really see direct correlations with some of the philosophical and religious paradigms that really relate to this type of thing of, you know, you just made a statement that I heard a couple of weeks ago by one of the, from India, one of the world greatest teachers in you know, Hindu and in Indian practices. It said there is no good or there's no bad. No matter what happens to you, it's not bad. It's a lesson in how you deal with it.
It's your perception.
It's a perception, exactly. Now, that's it's interesting that you would reiterate what was told to me, a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago. I guess
one of the people I followed almost religiously was Sai Baba. I don't know if you're familiar with Sai Baba.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got books on him and everything. The man was. I met a woman who spent a week with him down in Doylestown, and absolutely and totally amazing. Amazing. He'd walk across the grass, and the blades of grass would not bend under his feet.
It's hard for the general public to accept this. Now, I've been up in Saylorsburg to the compound.
The ashram.
Yes,
I've been up there too.
I spent as much time as I could in the last 6 months up there and listened to the lectures.
I love the bookstore.
What an amazing... Yeah, and been in the bookstore, been mentored by a gentleman from Mumbai who actually has a Ph.D. in computer science. He's a remarkable family. I have learned so much. It's such an eye-opener.
Oh,
and
yeah.
to me, it's very humbling to see how ignorant I am. And I almost don't have enough time to absorb this. And when we come back here, I just got to go through a couple acknowledgments for our sponsors. There's another part of your capabilities in terms of past life regression, which most people will dismiss out of hand, but which has such remarkable documentation today that it's unbelievable. So let me just say real quickly.
We'll dispel that myth when we come back on.
Well, that's great. We're not going to go anywhere, but I just want to say that this is Jersey Talk Radio. I'm Bruce Pearson, filling in for my good friend who's under the weather with bronchitis, Richard G. We wish you a speedy recovery. But we're at the Flemington Car and Truck Country Broadcast Center on 127 Main Street here in Flemington, New Jersey. We'd like to acknowledge our premier sponsors, Flemington Car and Truck Country, Steve Califer and the team over there. Also, Ameriprise Financial, Patton and Heidi, associates from up in Annandale. CenturyLink, who's bringing us our data and transmission capabilities here, and it does a great job for us. We appreciate it. Madalena's Cheesecake and Caterers, they're the official sponsors of any treats and foods for the network. SM Hanra Carpets down in Plainfield and in Lebanon, who has graciously carpeted our studios and offices for us. Steve Carroll over at NJ Sign Store in Lebanon Plaza also. Good friend of ours, and if you come by the studio here, you'll see some of his artwork. And we just appreciate all of our sponsors, and we appreciate our listeners and viewers here for the network, and there's more coming. But let's get back to the show. We're with Robert Burns of Robert R. Burns and Associates is your company, and I want to get back into if there's so much to cover. We're going to have you back again for sure, and hopefully you're going to have your own show. But
I will have my own show probably by March at the latest.
Well, if not, you always. I mean, I would like to go with you and follow up if that's appropriate, and maybe document some of it. I've worked in my investigative and documentary days with some reincarnation investigations, and also talked to some medical people who have discussed the documentation regarding reincarnation. I'd like you to tell us about your experience, because you're in the front line of this, and folks, if you don't believe this, take a look at the documentation.
Yeah, you don't have to believe it. I mean, I know a lot of people don't think that they think that all of a sudden everything is dark and they're gone. But I'm going to start out with this. We are comprised of energy. Okay, you cannot kill energy. You cannot destroy energy. Energy goes on forever. I was working with a woman who was fairly local, and I had her. We were doing a past life regression. Now, when I do a past life regression with somebody, Bruce, I anchor them, because you have no idea where you're going. Okay, so you build an anchor, and an anchor is get somebody laughing, take their wrist or their knee, whatever's closest to you, with permission, squeeze it and say, "You're great." Because what that'll do is that'll bring the laughter or the good feelings back. Now, it's not an anchor that's going to last a lifetime, but it'll last a session.
Interesting.
Okay, and I won't do a past life without an anchor. Now, the second thing is I took this woman back and I had her down very deep. Now, people can see me, but she was like this in the chair. And so I fired the anchor and I brought her back and I said, "What's going on?" She said, "Oh, thank you." She said, "I was a man and I was being hung." So I said, do you want to do another one? Well, knowing her the way I do, she said yes. But we
Wow.
go back to past lives. We have been here hundreds of times. There is no doubt about that. Sai Baba, who we talked about prior.
Sure.
Sai Baba, he died in 1918, came back in 1926. He comes back every 8 years and goes through another lifetime.
Can I ask you some? I hate to have such practical, mundane questions,
That's okay.
but does that allow then that there are a finite number of spirits or persons or entities or whatever that's there's 600 million, there's 5 billion, is that, I mean, is that even a germane question? But my question would be, are there new souls born, fabricated, hatched, whatever comes, or is this just a finite bunch of, we're all here and we're just working up the ladder? And
we're all here and we're working up the ladder. I don't believe there's new souls. People say, well, so-and-so's an old soul. And there is no old souls, new souls. There's experienced.
Okay.
Are you with me? That, to me,
well,
makes
I
the
am
most
only
sense.
because I've been trying to work at a regular basis for the last couple of years on and off with Dr. Michio Kaku and the whole multiverse string theory, the fact that, and it all ties in, and that's the beauty of all this. I think that it all does connect the dots when you, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't mean to get you off topic, but that we experience time as a linear progression, and yet it's not linear, perhaps.
No, it's now.
It's
It's now.
interesting that we only perceive it and understand it in a linear procession,
Exactly.
which means that the Civil War soldier that we visualize or
Be
walking
right here
through,
in front of us.
right, it's happening right now. We just don't
Exactly.
realize it.
Exactly.
That's a hard thing for me to get my head around, but yet I do understand it on one level.
Well, you know what's interesting is I think I shared with you before this show about this woman who saw a fellow who had died in an airplane crash
Yes.
walk across her yard headed toward the front door. And she said, I never thought about it. That's the key right there. She didn't think about it. She just got up and went to the front door. And when she opened it, he wasn't there. I said, yes, he was, but you couldn't see him because you were viewing it with this, your filter.
Your
was viewing
filter.
it. Right. I refer to the conscious mind as a filter. The subconscious mind sees everything. And I remember having a woman
Is
on
that the third eye, if you will?
Yes.
That
Yes.
okay?
Yes, that's your third
And once
eye.
again, in the Eastern traditions, the third eye is
Right.
the all-seeing eye, and it has other traditions in the Western world too.
One of my quotes is, what you see with your eyes open pales in comparison to what you see with your eyes closed. That's another quote that's on my website. Because when your eyes are closed, you're seeing with this eye.
And do you allow for, in your experience, or do you have any history documentation or evidence for out-of-body travel and all
Yes,
that?
I do. Are you? I got.
Wow.
Oh, you're gonna get a kick out of this one.
These are all kind of topics we've covered on our national show.
I had a man one time. He said, "Can you take me out of my body?" I said, "Yes." I said, "I can help you." I said, "But you take yourself out of your body." Now, being as how this is going to be a visual show, people will understand this better. I had him lying on a sofa with his head towards me and his feet away from me. So even if his eyes were wide open, he couldn't see me because I
Okay.
was sitting behind him.
Right.
And I induced a trance, and I told him, lift out of your body. Lift up slowly but steadily. Lift out of your body. And as he did, I said, okay, now roll over on your stomach and face me. And then I went like this. And he started laughing. He couldn't see me.
There's
but
no
he started
possible
laughing.
way that he could have physically.
Exactly, because he was laying on the couch away from
Right,
me.
right, with no
with his eyes
mirror or
closed.
nothing. Yeah,
Right.
with his eyes closed. Because the fact of the matter is, and let's go back to our tangible, what we think is our reality now.
Right.
You could find many emergency room physicians and staff people over the years. I mean, it's been well documented. Well, really, this person was clinically dead for 11 minutes, so that meant that we were far beyond the brain function
Exactly.
situation, but yet they heard you make the crack about, well, I guess we'll get out of here and play golf early today.
Right.
Really? Very inappropriate, very embarrassing, and yet it proved that I flew out of my body and was watching you, and I saw you drop the scalpel on the ground.
Right.
Really? How did you do that when you were dead for 11 minutes before that, or 15 minutes, or an hour and a
But
half?
that's what, the metaphor or the example that I use is if you walk into your house and you're soaking wet from rain and
Right.
you take off your wet clothes and drop them and walk in to get dry clothes, that's the same as when you quote unquote die. You drop your body and keep moving on. The body dies, we do not. And I was telling my friend Pat, who works in hospice, I said, Pat, do you want to tell the people, if you can tell the people that are coming from ego versus the people that are coming from spirit? She said, how do you do that? I said, very easy. I said, the ones that are fighting death
Are the
I
ones
said
that are coming from ego.
Yeah, because the body dies, the ego dies. But the ones that are going peacefully are coming from spirit because the spirit's going home. And, when you stop and think about it, doesn't that make sense?
Well, it all tends to make more sense than what we were brought up to believe.
Oh, yeah. And that's religion. Religion has us believe that. And there's a woman by the name of Patty Kogatek who wrote a book, A Change of Habit, and she was a nun for 7 years. And I interviewed her. And what a fascinating book that was. And she said one of her quotes is, don't let religion get between you and God.
Well, I believe. Listen, that's one of my soapboxes, and for all the good that religion's done, the religion's been a control mechanism, and it's not about universal principles.
No.
It's about control, and it's a human institution, unfortunately, and it has all the failings and problems that a human institution. I mean, the perfect example of that is being put to death if you read in the Middle Ages, up until I can remember going to a Catholic mass, and it's in Latin, and the girl I went with, who was a girlfriend at that time, she said, "What did you think?" I said, well, it could have been Pig Latin for all. What am I going to get out of that? I don't speak Latin. I don't have any idea what's going on. You could have been humming a tune.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
The principles aren't ridiculous. The theories aren't ridiculous. The
theories
concepts.
It's the way they're conveyed.
Well, and the scare tactics, you're going to burn in hell, and
There is no hell.
Well, that whole concept, I think, is, with all due respect, I think people are smart enough today to move beyond the dogma. I would hope.
People are waking up. People are waking up. Not all of them, but they're starting to wake up.
And then, unfortunately, and I say this truly in sincerity, unfortunately, all the bad press that accompanies, the Jim and Tammys and these guys that are over the top, these phony, and but it's indicative of people needing to have somebody to look up to.
They need a leader.
Exactly, and they need an icon and a good representative sample to follow. I mean, that's why we theoretically used to have heroes. We seldom find that anymore.
I know.
I mean, we ascribe to sports figures because they excel at what they do on the sports field,
But
and
they're
yet
not
they
doing
don't have
anybody any good.
Well, in many cases, and I worked in network sports for 10 years,
Right.
they are probably the most atrocious role models in many cases. Well, they really are.
I know. Look
And
at
it's a
Tiger
shame.
Woods. Yeah.
Well, look at Tiger Woods, look at Mike Tyson, you could go on, and that does not negate the guys that have done a lot of good. As a matter of fact, locally, Larry Holmes did so much to help people in Easton.
Yeah.
And so there are certainly, I don't paint everybody with that brush, but as human beings, we need somebody to look up to. We need a role model. We need an Audie Murphy. We need an Abraham Lincoln.
Reagan.
Well, and that's true. Somebody that shows strong leadership capabilities, whether you agree or not. And I think that, religion clearly followed that in many steps. Mm-hmm. And so let's go back to the reincarnation and go back to your experience and tell us some of the stories that you've
the past life regression.
Yeah, the past life regression, because I'm fascinated. I'm in line. I'll do it tonight with you. Think it's unbelievable.
You're going to like this one. I had a woman
Mind-blowing.
come to me when I was out in Pennsylvania, and she said, Bob, can you help me? And I said, help you what? And she said, my husband passed away about a year ago. She said, a lot of my friends, their husbands or people that they've loved have passed away, but the people come to visit them. She said, my husband has never come to see me. I said, would you like to meet him? I said, and still stay alive. She said, can you do that? I said, no, but you can. I said, I will help you. So she said, okay. So I gave her I always explain hypnosis to the nth degree before I do it. And I want people to feel comfortable with me before we do anything. So I took her into a deep state, and I had her lift out of her body and go up and visit her husband. And after about 20 minutes to a half hour, I brought her back. And when she came back, she was sobbing hysterically. And I said, did you meet him? She said, yes, I did. She said, I met him. She said, and he told me the reason he never came back is because I always yelled at him. She said, and I did. She said, but the damn fool was in the same suit that they buried him in.
Wow.
I mean, and then I had another case where this woman called me up in Stroudsburg. And she said, Bob, she said, I hope you can help my daughter. She said, I've heard about you, and I know that you've done a lot of good for a lot of people. And I like hearing that, by the way. But anyhow, she said, my daughter, my boyfriend and one of his friends took my car, and they took it for a joyride. And she said, they hit a tree, and they were both killed instantly.
Wow.
And my daughter, who was walking along, came upon the scene. She said, can you help her? And I said, yes. So I went up the next day. And when I went up, I had the daughter go through the same thing. Walk around the corner, find the car, find the two bodies in it, but I had her lift out of her body and go up and talk to their spirits.
Wow.
And their spirits told her, we're okay. That's okay. You have to not worry about us. And that calmed her down completely. But once again, Bruce, when you get to the inner part of a person, the spiritual part of a person, through whether you're helping them with sales, whether you're helping them with past lives, whether you're helping them with anything like we've talked about, miracles take place. It's a matter of getting past this thing.
Well, and it's hard as a hardcore journalist to accept something so out of our normal paradigm.
I know.
Now, I'm going to make a proposal to you, and I want to get your reaction.
Okay.
Do you have, if you were in that as this young lady did, and for just out of the ignorance of speaking, for people to try to envision this, is it like a big, is it giant stadium and everybody just sitting there hanging out, or is it not? Is every soul that ever was, for example, I would propose to you. Could we take an individual? Could you take me and work with me on this? And I want to go back and I want to meet Abraham Lincoln or Teddy Roosevelt.
If you met him in a past life, yes. If you didn't, no.
And how do you determine that?
No, I don't determine it. You do.
I mean, how would one determine that, I guess, is the proper answer or question.
I would take you back to that time frame. I would take you back to that time frame, and then I would just let you wander around that time frame, and then after about a half hour, 45 minutes, I'd bring you back up into the room. But if you had met him in a past life, you would remember it. But if you hadn't, you wouldn't meet him this time, because your spirit connected once, it'll connect again.
So there had to be a connection in the physical world at some point.
Yes. Now I might be incorrect with that.
Okay. But that's your
that's
your
my
belief.
theory.
Okay.
Right.
And what about then second, third generation early in your own family that you really had no physical connection, so there's no way you could ever talk to anyone that you haven't known in this life?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I have a dear friend of mine, and she was telling me that her grandmother died before she was born. But she said her grandmother, a message that she got is her grandmother held her. Now, that's pre-birth. The grandmother was gone. She wasn't born yet, but the grandmother held her spirit.
Wow.
That's
So
out
maybe
there,
it-
but
yeah.
I believe that. I don't see any reason why that couldn't be. I really don't. Because as you get more and more, and you said it earlier before the break, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know.
Oh, it's mind-boggling how little you really understand about, and to me, my fear is I'm going to take the dirt nap before I get to at least look into some of this. Let me ask you a follow-up question.
Go ahead.
Because this is some of the interviews we've had. The whole concept of and for lack of better terminology, a guardian angel or a mentor or an angel there's someone looking over you. Do you have any comprehension of or any concept or say it's your mom or dad have passed? I mean, are they hanging around watching everything that goes on? Which would probably be pretty embarrassing for most of us to begin with.
Well, depending on what we're doing.
Exactly. I mean, let's face it. There's a lot of things that go on in your personal life that you probably don't, want mom and dad watching for a million reasons, whether it's going to the bathroom or whatever, But are these people like standing at the ready on duty, or I mean, what's your understand? That's probably a ridiculous question.
No, it's not. It's not ridiculous at all. I went out to Pennsylvania for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
October 1st, 2011, I came back to New Jersey, and I moved into my apartment in Washington.
Okay.
And while I was in my apartment in Washington, I kept getting this feeling, I've got to give my mother a call. Now, my mother passed away in '89, but I've got to give my mother a call. And I kept thinking that. And then I had a guy come up who was taking one of my trainings, but he was also a psychic. And he said to me, Bob, your mother's here, and she's glad you came back to New Jersey. And that clicked. That's why I kept getting that urge to call her, because she was around me. Her essence was around me, even though she'd been gone.
And how strong is that ability that we've all heard about to cross that divide, to cross that...
Coming from this side there or that side here?
That side here.
That I don't know. I don't remember. I know I've been there, but I don't remember. But it has to be pretty strong, because he said, she's so glad you came back to New Jersey. And I thought that was really cool. Now, that has faded. In other words, I still think maybe now once a month I got to give my mother a call. But when I first came back, it was a couple of times a week. And I got to give my mother.
Do you have in your experience instances where people have had an ongoing relationship with someone who's passed on? I mean, on a regular basis, communicated with them and said, "Hey, yeah, we got the siding put on the house last week. What do you think about that?" I mean,
Not that I can remember off the top of my head, but if the show was longer, I could probably come up with something, but not off the top of my head. I don't remember.
How many people? That brings a good point. How many people have you worked with probably in your career doing this?
Thousands. All over the country. I've worked with people with migraines out in California. I've worked with thousands.
The range of services and the range of outcomes that your capabilities can produce is in itself astounding.
Yeah,
I mean, the fact that you can help someone who's got morbid obesity. You can help someone, and have you worked with a lot of maladies beyond, obviously, the ultimate cancer, and overweight, but have you helped people cure acne and arthritis? Really?
Yeah. Rheumatoid arthritis, I had a woman call me up, and she was in Connecticut, and I worked with her twice, and she called me up after the second session. She said, Bob, I woke up screaming last night. I felt it leaving my hands. I mean, are these people leveling with me? I like to believe they are. But people that are afraid of height, not a problem.
So phobias too.
Phobias are easy to get rid of.
Well, that's
Allergies
probably easier for most
bit
people to accept than some of the others. Now, let me ask you this, and I'm not being a smart aleck about this.
Be a smart aleck.
But so I could theoretically say to you, listen, this is the best money I could ever spend. I'm going to set aside money, and I need to tune up, soup to nuts. I want you to help me lose some weight. I want to get my attitude realigned. I want to get reinvigorated as an entrepreneur. I want to do the following things. Would there be any reason why that's not feasible?
No, not at all. The only thing that is stopping you from all those things is this: self-limiting beliefs. And that,
and everybody from Zig Ziglar to Wayne Dyer and Robbins and the rest say, hey, look, if you visualize it, it will happen. And certainly extreme athletes and a lot of people who really defy the limits that we all believe exist in many circles say that. Once you have that vision, and I think that that's the entrepreneurial passion at a very limited scale. But somebody who says, look, I know this is going to work. I'm going to do it. I got to make this happen, has enough drive and whatever it takes to make it happen to a great extent.
Well, the key word there,
do you think
Bruce,
that's fair or no?
Oh, yeah. The key word there is emotion. When you get emotional about something, you will do it. All right. When I ran up the stairs in 1987, I ran up the stairs to get something out of my office. I was still with my wife at the time. When I got to the top step, I was gasping for air. And I took the pack of cigarettes that I had in my pocket out. I took one cigarette, put it back in the pack, squashed up the pack, and threw it out. An hour later, I smoked half of the one. I haven't smoked since. And that was in 1987. And
Wow.
But I realized I had two daughters, aged 2 and 7. And I wanted to see them grow up. And I figured if I keep going like this, I'm not going to see that. Now I've got grandchildren.
I'm gonna share two things with you, and I want your because we're coming up. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. The time is eating us up.
We'll do this again.
One is that in my life, I've been criticized for being too passionate about things. Well, wow, you get a little cranked up about that. Well, I said, if there's no passion, it's easy to walk away from a wrong that needs to be righted. I mean, it's not a Don Quixote thing, but I think that people that don't get fired up about anything, I feel sad for them because they don't ever feel the need to really do what it takes to get the job done. Now that may be rationalization. I think
it's not rationalization. It's true because enthusiasm is a Greek word inferring the God within. Okay, enthuse, God.
Okay, Thusel, yeah, Thusel. Okay.
So I mean, when you're enthusiastic about something, you've reached beyond the physical. And if you don't get enthusiastic about anything, how much fun are you to live with? Really?
Well, I'm probably not. Here's one other thing I want to share with you.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm a freshman in high school, reading an in-depth article about how bad salt is because we have salt in all our foods and so on. That day was the last day I ever touched the salt shaker to this day, and I'm 58 years old. I mean, it was just like you with the cigarettes. I said, you know what? That's one thing I can control. Now, there's a million other things that are going to get me. I'll probably get run over by a cement mixer, hit by a meteorite. But I'm not going to add extra salt. And I just cold turkey did it and made up my mind to do it. I don't know what that means. I'm probably a little weird. But having said that, I want you to tell people how to get in touch with you.
Okay.
Your website, your phone number, contact information. And your I want to show your website while you're talking about that. So let's do that before we wrap up.
Okay. My phone number is area code 610-462-0804. It's my cell phone. I live in Jersey. I'm a native of New Jersey. I was out in Pennsylvania for about 4 or 5 years, and I came back. My email, the best way to get in touch with me is bob@bobburnsspeaks.com.
Which is your website. BobBurnsSpeaks.com is your website.
Bob Burns Speaks is the website. Bob@BobBurnsSpeaks is my email.
Perfect. Easy to remember.
So, yeah, and just remember, do not leave out a BS.
Right. And there's your website, so you have an idea what the landing page looks like.
Right. And the thing is, never hesitate to call. I mean, I don't bite. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. And I also do seminars and trainings and everything around New Jersey, all over the country, but locally.
And you will work with an individual
on
all kinds of problems.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't matter. I will talk to them, and if they're comfortable with me, I will work with them. If they're not, then I won't. It's up to them.
Well, unfortunately, that linear progression of time has caught up with us today. So
it's not now
this
anymore,
has been, unfortunately, it's been Richard's expense because he's under the weather and feeling ill. But, Bob, this has been the most remarkable in my 40 years of being in broadcasting. This is an eye-opener. This is a game-changer interview, and I thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I look forward to working with you to some extent somehow down the road, and thanks for being on the show.
It was my pleasure, Bruce. Really.
For Rich Gerstner, JerseyTalkRadio.com from the Flemington Car and Truck Country Broadcast Center. Robert Burns, you need to talk to him and look at his website and look him up because I'm sure there's nobody in our audience that doesn't have something that you could work on successfully.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you the next time. Godspeed.
I'll be here.
And good afternoon. I'm with David White of PLS Consulting. And today's show is going to prove to be very interesting. The title of our show is, David?
We're going to talk about leadership and management, how they are both similar and different.
And the fact that in many organizations, they're really not different, and they should be, perhaps, right?
Well, done properly, they're different.
Okay. I'll buy that. So let me just get you online here, Dave, and I'm going to let you start off. And first of all, I think it's important if you tell people, once again, for our listeners and viewers, your company, where you live, and how they get a hold of you, and all that neat stuff, so that they can avail themselves of your expertise going down the road.
Sure. I do performance consulting work. The name of my company is Performance Leadership Systems. And the easiest way to get hold of me is either via email, dave@performanceleadershipsystems.com, or my telephone number, 908-347-7793.
Okay. So I'm going to put up your website here. Tell me a little bit about what services you provide, and then we'll get into the topic of the day.
Well, I work with companies of any size, but I do different things with different size companies. With large companies, I've got a completely different performance review process, a topic you and I have talked about on a number of occasions, Bruce, and
absolutely
one that's near and dear to my heart. So my process actually works, as most of the ones that exist out in corporate
which are window
America.
dressing, which do nothing but cause more problems than they solve in many cases.
In my opinion, let's put it this way: I don't think they do a whole lot to improve performance, and that's what the objective of those programs is. For mid-sized companies and smaller companies, I work in the area of talent management, and that's the whole issue of, do you have the right people with the right skills, and also engagement, which is, are the people committed and giving you the discretionary effort that we all have, or right. Are they lining up, at the door at 5 o'clock, and you better get out of the way because you'll get trampled. And then I also have a background in family therapy, so I enjoy particularly working with family-owned companies because they are unique. Every family-owned company, just like every family, has some unique dynamics to it. And it makes it more complex when you're running a company and balancing that against some family issues.
Well, I can imagine that's another layer of issues that wouldn't normally exist if it was put in the context of a standard business. And,
exactly.
You're an employee, I'm a manager. We don't need you anymore. Have a nice day. Thanks.
Right.
Don't let the door
and
go.
now all of a sudden you're looking at a
That's
22-year-old kid with the same last name as the owner, and
yeah,
it's
you
different.
Can't fire him. Well, actually, I can, but
yeah, but then you have to face mom.
Yeah, I'm going to tell mom that you didn't let him take an extra week vacation. So
yeah, that's I'm
and I'm sure I'm oversimplifying
things. Right,
things,
exactly. But
clearly, but
let's face it, it's different.
Well, and I think that unfortunately, it's different in how it affects the bottom line too. So it's not funny necessarily.
No,
cute.
it's not funny, and usually, let's just say the dynamics of a family don't stop at the front door, and so depending on what those dynamics are, and none of us came out of a perfect family, so there's always going to be some degree of dysfunctionality. And that gets carried in.
Well, that brings up a good point. Your training and your expertise goes far beyond the business world. Tell us about your family counseling capabilities also, because I mean clearly that's not an inconsequential or minor adjunct to what you bring to the table.
Well, it's probably one of the things that makes me somewhat unique in the field that I'm in. But the reality is, Bruce, I'm not doing family therapy when I go into a business. I'm really not.
And yet you are, to a certain extent, de facto, right?
Well, what I'm going to help them do, and where it comes in and is very valuable, is for me to understand what the underlying family dynamics are.
Right. Whether you provide a solution that goes in that direction.
Yeah, I'm not really there to provide a solution. What I might be there and might be able to do is I might help them in terms of resolving some of the conflict that is being carried over, if there is some. Or in the course of helping them navigate the whole process, it might impact some family dynamics. But fundamentally, it's really for me to understand what's going on so I can be more effective in my consulting role.
How many, in your experience, how many companies out of 100 that are family run well?
Well,
where you
let's
have
put it this way.
multi-generational or even one generation where brothers or sister-in-laws. And,
Most of them don't make it to the third generation.
wow.
The vast bulk of family-owned companies either go away, either die, or are sold. But they don't. The vast majority of family-owned companies do not make it into the third generation of a family.
Wow, that's pretty sad.
Well, look, I spoke with someone recently. I'm not going to name who the person was, but she and her brother were running a family-owned business very successfully. But they also realized that given the businesses they're in, there's no future for it.
Well, that's true. I mean,
And so she's saying, we're not encouraging our kids to even think about it because we know
that we're not going to make a lot of wooden wagon wheels. Here in the
Yeah,
next
she
10
said when
years.
we were young, there was a future. Now things have. It's the old buggy whip scenario.
Exactly.
It's going away. It's being replaced by something else, and she's fine with that because she's had a good career.
How would you? And this is probably not a fair question. Once again, it's a nuts and bolts question. How many family-founded run businesses have a longer lifespan than corporations that are organizations that are founded? I mean, do they have a worse track record or a better track record?
Well,
You may not know the answer to that. It's not a fair question, but I'm just asking.
no, I don't know the answer.
All right.
I
Well, you
mean,
can ignore that question then because
well,
it's not fair of me to ask you.
Well,
This
I can tell you about most family companies don't make it to the third generation, but I don't know what the lifespan.
Yeah, I wonder what it is in the general.
Most companies that are getting incorporated, I have no clue. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you in the restaurant industry, it's not anywhere near three generations. It's 3 weeks.
That's a tough industry to make a
Exactly.
go of it.
I don't know why I brought that up, but I mean, I think there's probably market segments that don't do quite that well. So, when you take on a client, how does that start? What happens? I mean, do you get a referral? Or
absolutely.
You get a bail bondsman call you, or
Not usually.
there's no phones in the jails anymore. I can tell you that from
most of
personal
it
experience.
but the vast bulk of it comes from a referral.
And who would the referral come from?
Someone who knows me pretty well.
Oh, okay, but I mean, it's not from a client side of the fence.
Oh, no, absolutely, it could come from the client side, though they normally won't refer me to someone in their industry. That
for
doesn't-
good reason. I mean.
Well, yeah, exactly, and I don't expect them to.
And so
if I'm helping them, they're not looking to help their competitor with the same kind of assistance. So,
does the promised or requested outcome stay pretty much the same? Do they say, look, we're ready to get baseball bats and go at each other in the front office, or do they say we'd like to improve our performance and we think
it's all over the map. I mean,
Okay.
the fundamental issue when I meet with someone for the first time who's interested is, okay, what are you trying to accomplish with your company?
Fair question.
Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be after a certain period of time? How are you trying to get there, and how well is it working? And what's keeping you awake at night?
wow,
And those questions will take me to
Right.
whether or not I can be of any assistance.
and
to
what
them.
the next step is if you can be.
Right. And some companies, I talked to a company recently, which was a family-owned company. I have some sense of the dynamics. But I basically came back to my contact and said, you guys aren't in enough pain yet. And I know that
Really?
sounds... Yeah. Kind of shocked the person I was talking to, I think, a little bit, because not the response he was getting from, you would expect to get from...
You didn't run out and sign them up.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that says something about you right there that It's not driven by unmitigated greed.
Yeah. Well, I just said I think maybe down the road, but not now. I don't think you're ready, because I don't think you're really in that much pain yet. There has to be a certain amount of dissatisfaction or unhappiness with someone before they're going to come to someone like me to help them look at and resolve their problems.
But what about the organization that doesn't realize how screwed up they are? I'm too ignorant to realize how ignorant I am. That's usually where I fall into the category, but
there's probably
they're not going to call you, right?
No, they won't.
Because they don't even know to call you.
Right. And the reality is, it's like when you do family therapy, the family is most openness to change in a crisis. And so it has to get bad sometimes before they're willing to consider actually committing themselves to doing things differently.
So how many of them have you had to walk away and say, well, this is a basket case? Pull the plug in the bathtub because the water's going out.
I'm trying to think. I mean, for clients that I've
and that's not necessarily
with,
I don't mean that that's reflective of failure on your part, but it's just so bad and so irreversible, or they're so intransient on working together to resolve the problems that you just said, well, you know what, you guys, if your shoes are wet, it's because you're on the main deck of the Titanic right now.
Yeah, I've had, because I used to do consulting work with my dad, and most of our clients are family-owned companies, and I've had to say to a couple of clients,
nice knowing you.
It's not going to work.
Right, if you get a job.
Yeah, and I had one client a long time ago, and we're not getting to the topic, but
no, we will.
Yeah.
We will. Well, I just want to get some background for the audience.
It was a family-owned company that the ownership of the family brought in a new person to head it up. Okay, and we had worked very long time with the previous president of the company. Well, they brought in this new guy, and he called me in, and he had all of his direct reports there, and we were talking, and he asked me to do something that I thought was flat out unethical. He wanted me to, contact some of his competitors and misrepresent myself to try to get some information.
Wow. Yeah, that's a little sketchy, huh?
Yeah. And he did it in front of a group.
Really?
Yeah. And I looked at him and I said, I really don't think I'd be comfortable doing that.
Yeah. It kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Right. And then he got really snotty. He said, well, we'll just have to find something that Dave is comfortable doing.
Oh, nice.
Just like that.
Let's belittle me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just looked at him and grinned, and I said, sometimes there's a value in being your own boss and having your own company.
Let's find another vendor because Dave's heading out. Have a nice day.
This isn't going to work.
Wow. So let's get down. Let me ask you this. Today's topic.
Yeah.
How big a part does that play? The role of the leadership versus management. How big a part does that play in success or failure?
Well,
in your mind,
it's huge depending on where the company is. All right, because the two things, management and leadership, both are to some degree situational. Which one works and which one is most effective depends on where the company is and where it's trying to go and how much change needs to be, how much it needs to change in order to get to where it wants to go. Okay.
Is it fair to say that leadership is more policy oriented and management is more operationally oriented, or no?
No.
And is that a misconception on my part?
I would let me just say I don't think that's at the crux of the issue in terms of what makes the two different.
Interesting. So let's talk about what you see in your experience and how the solutions work.
Did we want to say something about people making calls or calling
Absolutely,
in too?
by all means.
Yeah, feel free.
And the
anyone
number?
Who's listening.
Okay, you got to give them the number, and I'll get it up on the screen.
Yep,
as soon as
it's
I can.
908.
Okay.
347-7793.
I'm just going to work on getting that up for folks, and we'll have you give it again. But once again, for folks that are going to try to dial, 908-347-7793. And feel free to call in. We'll take your call on the air. And you don't have to disclose who you are, but we would appreciate it if you were civil, so Dave doesn't cut me off.
So Dave doesn't have to hang up on you. So let's start the conversation with looking at how management and leadership are similar. All right.
Okay. And that number again, real quick, because I'm going to
Okay.
type it in.
908-347-7793.
Thank you. So feel free to call in, folks, if you're so inclined and have any questions or you'd like to add to the discussion today, and we'll get you on the air. So let's go ahead, Dave.
Okay. The thing that they have in common is that both management and leadership involve trying to accomplish some result, right? And you have to accomplish that result through other people,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to influence people somehow to get the result that you're trying to achieve. And usually the third element that they have in common is that there's a time issue. They're time bound to some degree. You know, the result has to be accomplished within a certain framework of time.
All right, so that is the management
And
scenario or the leadership?
No, it's true for both. It's true for both leadership and management.
Okay, but I would respectfully interject that if they're an employee, you really don't have to convince them to do anything. There's either if you want to keep your job, you need to get this done.
Right.
Is that fair? I mean, that's
Yeah,
the old
but
hammer.
even with authority, the reality is the way you're getting it done is through other people.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Even
Fair enough.
You know,
I understand.
and the effectiveness comes in to issue is if you rely only on your authority as a manager or a leader, the best you're ever going to get from people is compliance. If you rely strictly on your authority to get people to do things, you're going to get compliance. You're never going to get that discretionary effort. You're never going to get that person who's enthusiastic and really trying to, you know, to do an exceptional job. So with that having said that, though, those are the two things that have in common. And through all the years of industrial psychology, they've always looked at those two dimensions, the people or the result, the work or the people. And they've counterbalanced those two things. When you stop and think
Trying
about
to absorb the concepts as
Yeah.
you go through them.
Well, it's the people and results. Okay, yeah, put them on opposite sides of the table, so to speak. And that's how leadership studies first started out. They said, is a person high in people orientation or their result work orientation? And that made the assumption that you couldn't be high in both. Then they started to look at, well, maybe it's more of a 4-box thing, where you're high or low in terms of people and high and low on task. And that's where the whole theory of situational leadership came from. But I would argue that really is more situational management. It's not really a leadership issue. But when you think about getting results through other people, take the authority out of the picture, it comes down to how you're going to influence them. And when you influence people, that means impacting their behavior. You really only have two choices. You can either use your energy to push people, right?
Yeah.
Or you can use your energy to pull people. That's it. You're pretty limited to one of those two choices.
Yeah,
Okay?
what's the motivational factor? It's the carrot or stick. It's the hammer or candy.
It's more a question of how do you influence people. How can you impact their behavior? All right, and
Well, give me some tangibles. All
Yeah.
right? Give me some activities that would set examples for either of those.
well, stop and think about management behavior and management processes. When you break it down, you've got managers who they plan, right? They organize, they coordinate, they direct, and they control.
Okay.
All right. So let's take the behavior of directing. Is that going to be push or pull energy?
That's push.
It's push energy. Controlling, what's that going to be?
That's push,
Yeah,
clearly.
yeah. Coordinating, what's that going to be?
That's push.
Yeah. Organizing and staffing?
Push.
Yeah.
They're all
Almost
push.
all of the basic managerial processes involve push energy.
And from my understanding as a layperson in this area, I would say that once again, these are implementation, operational activities. They are not policy and philosophical. In other words, when you look at a mission statement, that's more of a policy decision. That's a leadership saying we're going to take care of our people, we're going to take care of our customers.
Establishing values and
Exactly,
things like
the
that.
values, and then our operational procedures will flow from that.
Okay.
Most management.
Hang on to that issue, because
Okay.
I think it'll come clearer to you is the distinction I'm going to be making.
Good.
But because
Perfect.
if you look at management, almost all of it is push energy. All right, and where
Yes.
that works well is where you are trying, or the organization is trying to accomplish consistent results in a relatively stable situation.
Agreed.
That's what the organization is.
Predictability.
Right, exactly. And it tends to be of a relatively, compared to leadership, the time frame tends to be shorter. Leadership is different. Okay? It involves a lot more pull energy.
Oh, I'd agree.
Okay? And where you need leadership.
Well, you're trying to get your workforce to buy into your view of how to do things, and then
the key word is change.
and change the paradigm or
There's
change the procedure.
something
or
that
change
needs
the
to
mindset.
change. It's a question of trying to promote positive change or change that's required to help the organization adapt to its environment. So like the buggy whip folks probably were great in terms of management, not so good on leadership because they didn't change, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't adapt to the environment and they disappeared. It's kind of like the landline telephone.
Right.
It's gone.
Well, I think you can perhaps draw a distinction between technological obsolescence or.
But that's the market, Bruce. So if you don't stay current with what's going on in your market technologically, if you're in a technologically market, you're going to be in trouble.
But I don't think that's, with all due respect, that doesn't necessarily reflect how you treat your people.
Oh, I didn't say that. I'm just talking about you need leadership to create positive change. You need management to create consistent results in a more stable situation. Change, by the very nature of it, means that there's some uncertainty and instability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When that's the case, leadership is called for, and that requires a whole lot more pull energy.
Gotcha. I can't disagree with that.
Okay. And it starts with the whole vision process. And what you're doing when you create a vision is you're putting a picture out there for people that is attractive to them. That's why it's pull, right? So you say, look, this is where we want to go, folks. And hopefully that vision is attractive to them. So it gets people leaning forward in their seat. It's not enough to motivate them, but it gets them sort of moving in the right direction. Now, one of the keys to the people who are really good at this, at creating a vision, is they will ask people to add to the vision. This is where I see us going, help me complete the picture and paint a more complete picture. Now, what happens when people add to the vision? Now they start to take ownership of it. It's no longer just the leader's vision, but it's my vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now you've got them moving that much more in the direction toward the change that you want to produce. And as opposed to directing and controlling and whatever, now you're talking about more of a building a coalition. And it's a coalition of people who think and share the same direction that you want to go. Typically, it's a coalition made up of people who are well respected at every level of the organization. You know, too often companies make a coalition of the next layer of management. No, it has to be a vertical coalition, because if I'm on the line, on the manufacturing line, the vice president of sales, you know, I'm not going to listen to him. I don't know him from Adam, and, you know, who knows how much respect for him. But if you take one of my peers who is an informal leader and he's on board with that change, I'm going to listen to him. Right? So it's an alignment. The process is aligning the people with the change. And again, it's pull energy, because to create that coalition as a leader, I have to find people who are respected, who will buy into that vision that we're trying to attain. So again, it's different energy.
I'm going to be terribly blunt with you, and I'm going to share, you know, my opinion or my response or my observation, is incorrect as it probably is that, quite honestly, whatever's coming from upstairs is shoveled on these people, and they're going to accept it because they really aren't given any option not to. So, I mean, we hear the grumbling in meetings that I cover. And you know what? It's like, oh, here we go again.
Absolutely.
And nobody asked me, so the buy-in, you know what? If you want to keep your job, you go along with the game plan, you fill out the forms, you follow the procedures, you go with the changes, because you don't, frankly, have a damn bit of choice in it. Or you can always, there's the parking lot. We don't want to see your car in here again.
Right. And
now that's a cynical way to look at it, but
no, there's no,
I don't see an inclusiveness in the management plan. You know, they all talk like, "Oh, we want you to get on board." That's nonsense. You're telling us what you're going to do, and we're going to either fall into place or find a new job.
That's why most significant change efforts fail. Most significant change efforts do not work.
I mean, you'll never see a ripple on the water because they're not going to put their head above the trench. But the bottom line is, all right, I'm along for the ride. Don't think I'm gung-ho on this. I'm not wearing corporate underwear just because you guys say it's the neatest deal that came down the pipe.
Look, you know, people feel trapped.
Yeah.
They're not going to raise their head above the sight line, okay?
No.
And the latent paranoia will run rampant throughout the organization, but on the surface, okay? But that doesn't mean you're certainly not getting the full benefit of the energy of the people you have in your organization when that's the case, okay? They're not saving their best for you.
No.
They're going through the motions. They're doing enough.
That's been my observation.
Doing enough not to get fired.
That's right.
Well, that's why the engagement, 70% of the employees in this country are disengaged.
Really? And they take it out in trade. You think, okay, we're only going to give you 1%. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the guys at the top are getting multi-million-dollar bonuses. Okay, that's a good motivator. Okie dokie. Yeah. No problem. I'm showing up. I'm still wearing a tie and jacket. I'm smiling. I'm saying everything politically correct.
Too, but yeah, okay. But
so
they've got a lot to lose.
Right. So the big question is,
right.
What the hell's the matter with American business management that they don't get it? That's not. Why do they think that's the way to motivate a workforce and become a world-class organization? What's going on here? Okay. What are they teaching them in Wharton School of Business that this is the way that you motivate human beings?
I'm not.
That's the $1 million.
I'm not going to be responsible for that. But back up for a second, because I'm sure you've heard, and this is very common, where somebody in business is taken. They're a very good individual contributor. They do a good job, right?
Right.
In their work, they're conscientious. They care.
They're a team player. They got their head in the game.
Right, exactly. And so they make that person a supervisor or a manager.
Right.
Okay. And what happens so often?
It goes off a cliff.
Yeah, exactly. Because the skills that made them so good as an individual contributor don't translate into the skills that are needed to be an effective manager.
Right.
Well, stop and think about it. We've said the same thing here.
But that's the Peter principle.
Different issue. Managers...
Same result.
Yes, similar result. But we've talked about how the managers are learned and schooled in how to use push energy to accomplish results.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay?
They're the guys giving the cattle prod.
They don't, and those are the ones who get promoted into leadership positions. They don't know how. They haven't. They're going to continue to push because that's what's got them to where they are, right? And now they need a new skill set.
Well, I'll throw another curve at you, not to make things even more complicated for you. All right, so why is it that the solution du jour for many companies is to cut the guts out of middle management to save money on payroll? The guys that do have some ground floor and women that have experience in the ground floor and know the organization, we can cut these folks out and we can hire a bunch. So they take the experience level, the culture understanding, the folks that have come up through the ranks in some cases, in many cases, maybe not all, and let's toss them out because we can get cheap people to fill them in. And that just even further weakens any understanding of what goes on in that company.
Well, in many cases.
Is that an incorrect view of things?
I think middle management, when cuts are made, middle management
gets hatcheted.
Pays a dear price.
The folks at the bottom aren't worth cutting because they're already at the bottom.
No. You need the people at the bottom because they're the ones who are actually
doing the work. And the folks at the top have they're
protected.
They got badge of merit card. They're not going anywhere. Because they're the ones. Yeah, they're the ones making the decisions who gets cut.
Yeah, and
not turning the gun on their own temple.
No, not as a rule. All right. So who's left?
Nice.
Okay.
So now you take the culture and toss it right out the window, the understanding of the business, and say, we're going to bring a bunch of rookies in to do it.
Well, yeah,
could be good.
Yeah, no, it's not good. I mean, it hurts. There's a tremendous loss of energy and knowledge when that happens. But it's the reality of what in many. I think you and I've talked to you about this before in terms of career development. Forget about climbing the career ladder because the way things are now, the rungs are being taken out of the ladder.
There aren't,
there's no ladder there
There's whole sections
anymore.
of the ladder missing.
Yeah,
at this
exactly.
point.
Unless you can jump real high.
I listened to an in-depth interview and review of corporate turnover in U.S. corporations. Now, here's a scary one. Do you know there's more than 97.8% or somewhere right around that area of retention in the NSA?
No. That's
in the
interesting.
CIA.
I'm not surprised, though.
So you want to talk about people that you got to pry their hands off the desktop to get them out of there? It would take 30 years to renew that workforce. So, wow. I don't know what that means in the big picture, but it's so far above the standard American model.
That's because those people are working with a purpose, a sense of purpose. It's not just work. It's more than work. It gives their lives meaning.
Yeah, it tells me that they've pretty much all drunk the Kool-Aid over there.
Well,
good, bad, or indifferent. These folks are, they're in it for the long haul.
When you look at engagement, one of the key issues, and I want to get back to management versus leadership, one of the key issues of engagement is that the work provides people with a sense of meaning. Okay?
Right.
And where it does, you're going to have people who are more engaged than with people for whom it doesn't. And the two agencies you're bringing up, I think, clearly demonstrate that, those people are dedicated to what the mission of those organizations are and feel like they're really making a contribution that is meaningful to their lives. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I want to jump in here and let everybody know you're on JerseyTalkRadio.com. I'm Bruce Pearson with David White, who is the owner of Performance Leadership Systems, and we're talking about serious issues in terms of helping businesses become more profitable and be more efficient, especially family-owned and operated business. That's his focal point, but he works with all types and sizes of businesses, and the discussion in today's focus is on leadership versus management and how those two interact or compete or fight each other in any given case. So, David, back to you. We have a live studio call-in line if you'd like to call us at 908-347-7793 on your cell phone and you'd like to weigh in on the discussion or ask some questions of David. Now's your time to do so.
So going back to leadership and management, this country has a lot of strong managers, okay, because that's what's, have come up through the ranks. That's not what's missing. What's missing is the people with the leadership skills, with the knowledge of how to use the pull energy to create change. And that's going to become more and more important because the pace of change is just getting faster. And so the need to adapt to what's happening in your environment is going to become greater and greater and greater. And I don't think that is going to be very different. It's just going to continue to get faster. I mean, who could have predicted the impact of the internet? And it's only been about 20 years,
Yeah,
right?
That's amazing.
Yeah. And look how it's
And who knows where it's going to be in 20 years from now.
and look how many industries it's turned upside down.
Trashed, one after another.
Yeah. And it happened literally in the blink of an eye. When you think about, the
Right.
whole period after the Second World War, when we underwent this huge industrial growth, for that 20-year period, 30-year period, it was pretty stable.
Absolutely. And that was snuffed out in a flash.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, the environment
The wheels
started
came
to
off the
change.
cart, yeah.
Well, the environment started to change, and the change started to happen more and more often, and faster, and managers didn't know how to deal with it. They knew how to manage. We'd gotten good at that, but the key is to find people who can both manage and lead. That's the real hard piece, and the thing that's missing the most is the leadership piece of it. And like I said, I honestly believe it's because most managers are not doing a lot of pulling. It's mostly, directing people and
Yeah, it's the boot up the butt.
Yeah. Well, it's consistent results in a stable environment. That's what they're good at producing.
All right, I'll throw another hard question at you because
Yeah.
I love doing that.
I know.
So, in your experience as an expert in this field, who do you think is a gold-plated representation in an organization, large or small? Large, if so, our people listening and watching who represents the gold standard of doing the right thing in this area?
Well, I think.
Would you guess? And it's only an opinion. I'm not. We're not maligning anybody that's not on the list.
Yeah, I don't honestly know, Bruce. I mean, I don't pay that much attention to the really large companies. Some of them have made some dramatic changes. Google eliminated its whole review process, wiped it out.
And you think that's a good thing?
I think it's I think it's a good thing if it's replaced by something else.
Did they?
Oh yeah. I think the biggest problem most companies have with the review process is they know it doesn't work and they know that people hate it, but they don't know what to replace it with, and they can't just eliminate it because that sends the message to their employees: well, your performance doesn't count, right? If you just take away that process, the one process in the year when we talk to you about how well you did your job, right? If we take that away entirely, we're in essence saying we don't care how well you do your job. And no CEO in his or her right mind is going to do that. So you got to have something to replace it with. And they don't know what to replace it with. And I've got a process that works.
So you're the solution to that problem.
Well, I don't know if I'm
well, you
personally
clearly
the
believe in
solution.
it, and it works. You've seen
think
it work.
I think I've got a process that works. Yeah.
And are you actively and aggressively trying to get this into big companies? And
Yeah,
how have they responded? Have they slammed the door in your fingers or not?
No. I've just recently started to do it because now is the beginning of the review process, and what I'm trying to do is get into some larger companies and do pilots, because there's nothing better than showing them, proving the results with a pilot. If they see the impact that it has, that will. I don't
And
have
the
to sell
impact
anything.
will. And how do you quantify the impact?
Well, that'll
As a
depend on
layperson.
the organization, but you'll quantify it a number of different ways. You'll look at you'll take some units, and you'll look at the results they've produced, and we'll look at the results.
Yeah,
what
so they can
changes,
control and
right, and then you'll
make
do
the
more
change.
subjective stuff in terms of the people's perception of the effectiveness of this compared to the old one.
Yeah, how many tires are slashed in the parking lot and that kind of stuff, right? I'm kind of a nuts and bolts guy.
Yeah, I know.
Who gets there?
Yeah, and
eggs on the hood.
Also the managers and the managers' reaction. Do you know how much time is wasted in that process now? It's incredible.
Yeah.
And here's the key.
I have a friend that used to spend 2 weeks on Cape Cod, and he'd spend half the time going, I have to do 400 performance reviews. He goes, what a stupid waste of time this thing is. They know it's a waste. I know it's a waste.
Right.
Everybody knows it's a waste.
But we have to do it. Except, you know who's not doing it? The CEOs. There was an article.
No, they just look at the summaries.
There was an article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago, and it was a survey, and it showed that something like 80% of the CEOs did not conduct performance reviews. So it was something that, with their subordinates, they didn't do it. It was something, oh no, I don't need to do it, but you need to do that. Well, if it's such a wonderful tool that's going to help you get better performance, why wouldn't you do it too?
Well, because it's just like Congress. We're not subjected to the laws we write for the rest of you.
Well,
what are you kidding?
Exactly. And you say something about cynicism and hypocrisy.
It's rampant.
It's a great breeder right there. Oh no, I'm not going to waste my time in doing it, but you have to do it.
I'll just fire you if I don't like what you're doing.
That or whatever, who knows? But I'm not going to sit down and talk to you about what I think, how good your performance was and what you might do differently and where you could improve. That's not going to happen. They don't do it.
At what size does a company get so small that they don't have the luxury of all this foo-foo stuff anyway? And so they don't do it because there's only 12 guys in the company. What, are we going to set up this whole plan and have you? I mean, where does that?
My process is so simple. Okay.
Are you able to share that, or is this a patent pending kind of thing? I'm not letting it out from under my bushel basket here.
Let me just say this. First of all, it doesn't focus on past performance. It focuses, okay, what are we going to try to accomplish next year? And it focuses where the manager has a real discussion with the person about, here's what I need from you next year.
And there has to be some look back to say, well, did you?
No. Why? Why?
Well, wait a minute. If I expected you to do X and you screwed off all year and didn't do anywhere near X, I disregard that going forward?
Depends on why, what the manager's perception of the reason as to why you weren't able to accomplish X. Okay? But start at the beginning.
Why set a benchmark if you're not going to be accountable for that?
But remember the conversation we had last week when we said many times the results that a person accomplishes, those results, the objectives, are not totally within the control of the individual. And
then why set the benchmark?
Because you still want to accomplish them. Doesn't mean you don't want to accomplish the results, but you need to recognize, well, what's the point of giving person feedback around something they had no control over and holding them accountable for it?
I think you're answering my question. The whole thing is, if you're not going to look back and say, listen, you're a die punch operator, and you took a break every 10 minutes to go smoke a cigarette, and you got 1/3 the output of everybody else on the line, then there's a direct reason. It's not because you didn't have the blanks. It's not because the power went out every 10 minutes. It's because you were screwing around taking a cigarette break or going to the bathroom or getting a soda.
Okay.
You are absolutely responsible for your performance.
Okay.
If you don't acknowledge that.
Let me show you how that conversation.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
I know you
here.
are, and you're having fun doing it.
Absolutely.
But let me show you how the conversation would go if I were doing it.
Good.
And I was that manager of that person. I said, look, we got to talk about two things. A, what you do, your actions, and B, the results. Number one, the results have to be higher next year. You need to increase your results so you bring them up with the rest of people. Number two is I need to see you change some behaviors. And one of the behaviors I need to see you change and stop doing is taking so many breaks and not being at your workstation, because that's part of what's involved in you're not achieving the results that you need to do. So I need to see those two changes, and those are critical for you to accomplish in next year. Let's talk about that.
Okay, I'm not sure I see a distinction now.
You didn't hear me beat the person up about you did this and you did that, and that was,
But that's a
bad.
subtle difference.
It's subtle, but it makes all the difference in the world, Bruce, in terms of how the person responds to it. It's much.
Oh, I'm not arguing it's not effective.
Much less putting the person on, backing them into a corner, and making them very defensive. The only time I would really come on the way you came on the first time, if I'm getting ready to fire the person.
How did I come on the first time? I wasn't even in this organization.
No. The first conversation you pretended to have, where you basically reamed out the was it?
Oh, right. Okay, just now.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right, I thought maybe I was
the
sleepwalking
only time you
again.
need to come on for that. And remember, we talked about feedback. Is if I really need to unfreeze someone's behavior.
Right.
If I need to unfreeze their behavior, I might come on that strong, because there's a time and a place where you got to hit the cow over the head with a 2x4 to get his or her attention. And I might want to be putting that person on notice. If this doesn't change, you're probably not going to be here next year.
All right, then the next question would be utilizing, and I don't want you to give away all your secrets here. Because,
No, it's simple.
So then how do you document that? Compared to the traditional way where
You don't.
It's 0 to 10, rate yourself, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, you don't. You don't, because the first thing they talk.
You got to get some pushback from people and say, well, you don't.
I get huge pushback, particularly from lawyers. Oh my God, we won't have the data we need to fire people. I got into a huge argument with the general counsel at one of the companies I work for.
I can understand that.
Right, and I looked at him. I said, well, then explain to me something, because here's my experience. My experience in all the companies I've worked for is that a manager wants to fire somebody, and they go to the performance review
and dig up and churn up the documentation that fits the profile they want.
No, it doesn't.
I'm just saying.
Documentation is glowing.
Right.
So this documentation you're saying is so critical for you to make your case about firing this person doesn't support that decision. Why would you want it?
So obviously that's not the key to the
That's
kingdom.
not the key. No. Look, if you got somebody you're ready to fire, you put them on a PIP. You put them on a performance improvement program where it's very clear. Unless there are these changes in a certain period of time, you will be terminated. That's your documentation.
And isn't that a nice phrase? Terminated. I mean, I'm not big on euphemisms, but that's a pretty
You're gonna
nasty
be fired?
phrase. Yeah, I mean,
this
terminated. Jesus,
yeah, it's like being killed, the Terminator. Yeah,
that's a nice way to put it.
It's been called a lot of different things, Bruce. I don't think you're going to come
That
up
just
with.
hits me that
you're
that's
not going to come up with a word that
kinda
has a
would get-
positive connotation.
That'd snap your head around if you said that.
We're going to give you a life-changing event, a new opportunity for you. You can call it what you want.
I'm just being facetious, but I'm just saying it is a pretty tough one.
It's nasty. It's a nasty process. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is you focus on the results and the behavior that you want to see the person do more of, do less of, or do differently.
And is that leadership or is that management? Or both?
Well, it's to some degree it's both, because it has an issue. It's forward looking, and it's probably more management than it is leadership, because it's still push energy. If I say
you're not giving them a vision to say, look,
no,
it's going to be utopia if you do this.
If I say to you, look, Bruce,
Seems to me it's pretty pushy.
I need you to do this differently next year.
Or you're going to get pushed out the door.
Stop putting words in my mouth, Bruce.
I'm trying to.
If I say that to you,
Right.
you feel my energy coming at you.
Yeah.
If you feel
You feel
my
the
energy
boot.
coming at you, it's push energy.
Yeah, it's a boot.
Yeah, it's not like I've got a vision of you doing these wonderful things, and in order to do that, you better do this. No, it's usually gonna be, the one time it could be pull energy possibly, and this does apply to where you need something different from the person. Is look, and I've seen this. I've seen this in organizations like where the sales were not good and managers started hammering. I mean, yelling and screaming at people.
That's a good motivator.
Oh yeah, that's great.
That's Khrushchev.
Right.
It took a shoe off.
Yeah, that's where you need to sit down and say, look, whatever you're doing and whatever I'm doing, it's not working. So we better put our heads together and try to come up with something that does work and make it a joint process as opposed to you got to do something different. Okay, it's really, and that now you're starting to move toward pull energy because you're saying, okay, we're going to combine our thinking here and see what we can do.
You need to get on mic for me there.
Now, in some cases, in this case, it wasn't a function of the salespeople. It was the function of the company missed the boat on the technology side. They fell behind the curve.
Well, that brings up a good point. We're coming up to the end of the show, but
Yeah.
is there a type of organization, a company, a service organization versus manufacturing where this fits better, works better, is more, or no?
With this being what?
Your concept of
The performance
Right,
review?
yeah.
Nah, it doesn't matter.
just doesn't matter whether they're selling widgets or
No, because
building airports.
you're always talking about two things, the behavior and the results. Those are the only two things you're ever talking to the person about.
Okay. Well, I want to show, as we wind up here, I want to show your website. I want you to tell people how to get in touch with you if they
Okay.
think that
Sure.
your services can be of value to them, or as a referral to another organization.
Yeah. One last thing. I just
Go
want to
ahead.
make sure it's clear that I'm not downgrading the importance of management, okay?
No, it doesn't.
Because an effective organization needs both good management and good leadership. If you have a company that only has effective leadership and no management, that's chaos,
Right.
okay?
Nobody's carrying out
Yeah,
the plan.
that's like a ship with a hole in the bottom. If you've got a company that only has management, strong management, and no leadership, that's where you get the huge bureaucracy, the stifling bureaucracy, right? That can't change.
And the bigger they get, that's usually the way it goes.
It does. Because the hierarchy, the organizational hierarchy, works better for managing than it does for leading. The leadership process usually bypasses the hierarchy. That coalition I was talking about, that's not the hierarchy. It's a group of people who cut across the hierarchy but are respected by their peers. See the difference? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
they-
They go around the system.
Exactly. Exactly. It's informal relationships.
All right, before we run out of time,
Yeah.
tell people how to get in touch with you, your website,
Sure.
All that neat stuff.
Okay. The website is www.performanceleadershipsystems.com.
And I have that up there now for our
Right.
viewers.
And what we're talking about here is really the whole change leadership, which is one of the service areas that I provide companies because I will help them build a leadership process.
And a phone number to get in touch with you,
908-347-7793.
which was our call-in number, so you can just pick that up off the rest of the show.
Right.
And we look forward to speaking to you next week. This is interesting. And we hope maybe by next week you'll have a new client on board and you can tell us how poorly or how well they're doing.
Well, I don't
I
have
know
a
you
magic
never-
wand,
I
Bruce.
know.
So
Well, that's right. I heard you did.
yeah, well, whoever told you that was wrong.
So that's it for this episode. Thank you, David White.
Thank you,
for
Bruce.
your expertise and fascinating topic, and one if people like to keep their jobs in organizations that continue to thrive and prosper, one with great consequences for anybody in the workforce because, as you alluded, it really doesn't matter what the business is. Folks are involved, and their jobs depend on it, so it's wise to pay attention even if you're not in management or leadership in an organization. You might have a better idea what they're struggling with at the front office. So we appreciate it, and that'll be it for tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next week. So thank you for being with us, and thank you to our viewers and listeners. This is Jersey Talk Radio. I'm Bruce Pearson. We'll see you next week. Thank you, David.